With the newly revealed information having to confirm that both Vegito and Gogeta are now officially equals courtesy of Jump magazine, many fans of the community and fandom seem to be very indifferent to the idea that Vegito and Gogeta now are officially equals, in neither of the two having to be superior or inferior to their counterpart. Courtesy of Jump magazine, it was listed as, quoted, "Popular characters from the Dragon Ball world are added to the canon by Akira Toriyama sensei's hand. If Vegito is born from the Potara earrings, then the dance fusion gives birth to Gogeta. Two equally matched ultimate trump cards." Now I want to go ahead and emphasize on two major points after having to list off this statement. Number one, Gogeta right now in the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie is far superior than Vegito was during the Goku Black arc, and one of the many reasons for that is seeing Goku and Vegeta adapt so much so following the Tournament of Power, it's only natural that right now their fusion stands superior, being that they are much more powerful than their counterparts seen during the Goku Black arc, which is common sense. Number two, nowhere has it ever been listed that one stands superior next to the other. In fact, if both Vegito and Gogeta existed at the same place at the same time, that they would be equal in powers, and that's where they currently stand. Now joining me here today to discuss this is my good friend EmoshIslive, as we further discuss the narrative and idea of Gogeta having to be compared to Vegito and vice versa. Now although many people watching this video are going to have a preference as to whether or not they prefer Vegito or Gogeta, I would like to know in the comments as to which fusion you guys prefer over the other, because in fact many people do prefer Vegito when going back to the original Dragon Ball Z dub and seeing the way Vegito was portrayed and having to be emphasized by the Elder Kai that the Potara earrings were listed to be more useful than the Metamarise fusion. And for many years we've seen this long debate between Gogeta fans and Vegito fans, but I wanted to get your take, Emosh, as to if you feel like now there is no significant difference or need to have a Potara fusion or a Metamarise fusion if they essentially create the same warrior, which to many people they would look at it as them both being the exact same warrior but different personalities and different sets of moves, which is essentially true. At the end of the day, they're both Goku and Vegeta in one body despite how you want to use the fusion method. So do you think that with this statement having to be put out there, it kind of demeans the purpose of the Potaras and the Metamarise fusion, being that they both essentially create the same thing? Or do you think that there's more being looked at now than meets the eye, and eventually it having to change as Dragon Ball Super progresses?
Okay, so this question is kind of difficult for me to answer only because I don't really know how to approach it. I mean, I like Gogeta. I mean, I also like Vegito as well, but I kind of like Gogeta more mainly because he was cool. And then every time I've seen Vegito, he's just, you know, joked around. I mean, Gogeta's done the same thing, and fusion characters tend to do the same thing. I think Kefla kind of like set a new bar for what fusion was, and granted that most of you guys may not like Bayfla, it doesn't change the fact that she's Bay and she's cool. But ultimately, I mean, the idea of Potara has always been something that's been touted to be stronger because it's, you know, based on theoretical multipliers, based on guys and all this other junk, and people just like Vegito better for whatever reason, even though they're both the same character. I mean, they're both composed of the same character, right? Some people might want to argue that, well, they have kind of different personalities, and I would argue, well, yeah, I mean, back then I remember we used to have arguments about one's canon, one's not canon, and now it's like none of that applies anymore. And I think this is just kind of like the fandom kind of backlashing only because we're being given a lot of change. For example, like when we first started was Broly, people were scratching their heads. Then we saw trailers and we saw clips and we saw the pieces of the movie, and now everybody's just like stroking him off. And I agree to that. I mean, that's just, you know, people were not really used to change as a fandom, as diehard fans especially. I mean, I would argue that most of the people complaining about anything or have anything negative to say about this are diehard fans that have watched the series since day one. And if anything, yeah, I would say it kind of devalues what fusion is, but ultimately fusion is fusion. It doesn't really matter how you do it. That's just how I'm looking at it. I'm just trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm just trying to give them the chance. Ultimately, when I heard about this news, I was just like, okay, they're just making it convenient. They're just making it simple because Dragon Ball Super has been not a complete mess, but somewhat of a mess in terms of the scaling, in terms of, you know, definitively portraying where characters stand and who's stronger and who's weaker and all this other stuff, right? And I think as it is, if you are a major fan of Dragon Ball Super, if you watch the series, despite whether you like it or not, I would argue, I mean, I'm pretty sure we would all like to see some kind of guide, definitive information with interviews about where characters stand, and they haven't really given us that, right? So I think the main thing here is that It's just a fandom thing. It's not really anything that really applies to anything. It doesn't take away from the series. All right. And I don't really care if people want to say, yeah, it does, because, you know, it's just becoming too simple. And, well, I mean, Potara is the most simplistic thing that you could ever ask for in terms of getting a power amp. You just slap a couple earrings on and, that's it. And Meta Marie's fusion, I think it kind of adds a different element. I mean, naturally, people want to say, well, Meta Marie's fusion sucks because you got to have the same power level. You got to bring yourselves down. But yeah, that doesn't matter. All it does is kind of emphasize on the need to train for something and work for a level of power that you're granted for the sake of the plot wank. So, I mean, you can't really argue to say that Potara is better because of the narrative. It is not narratively better than Meta Marie's fusion. And I know I kind of started this answer by saying I'm a Gogeta fan, but I could care less who's in the movie, to be honest. So,
right, but it was also implied on one of the Kanzenshuu forums on page 63 for the Super Guide that it was listed as Vegito equals Goku times Vegeta, and that kind of, you know, allowed people to assume that, you know, the Meta Marie's fusion is A plus B, where as opposed to the Potara was A times B. Again, there is no definitive statement or guide being put out there by the official sources that imply this, but if you're going to argue about the formula for Vegito being different than Gogeta, then I would have to disagree, because the power level of Vegito now currently is listed to be equal to Gogeta if they were to exist in the same setting right now as does in the Broly movie. It's egregious to have to go back and looking at what Vegito did during the Goku Black Zamasu fight, because you cannot compare Gogeta now to the Vegito that we saw fight Merge Zamasu, because one is far and beyond superior in comparison to the other, i.e. following the Tournament of Power, Goku and Vegeta got exponentially stronger and exerting more power in that time than what we saw Vegito do. However, fans are going to make the argument in stating, well, when you look at the energy that Vegito was producing during the fight against Zamasu, in real time you would say that, okay, he was in the fight for about 3 to 5 minutes, because he was exerting so much power that the Potaras could not sustain that. And that argument alone is used by many people in the fandom to imply that Vegito is clearly stronger, but being that he's so overwhelmingly strong, the Potaras cannot bear that power, which I do not agree with that retcon at all. And it was implied by Shin and Gowasu in the anime, and I do believe in the manga, that Vegito was very powerful for his own good, and thus not getting the job done against Zamasu. It was a very interesting scenario. Someone who was incredibly strong versus someone who seemingly enough cannot die. You had the perfect pairing. Now we have a different scenario to where we have the invincible fusion versus an ever so growing opponent. Now, when looking at the fusion concept now, being that if Vegito and Gogeta existed in the same place at the same time right now, what makes you look at fusion now and saying that there is a purpose for Meta Marie's over Potara, or Potara over Meta Marie's? Because people are going to look at that and saying, well, there's no point for Potara or Meta Marie's if they're going to end up the same. So looking at what they have to offer as, you know, individualistic warriors, Gogeta and Vegito, do you think that their personality and attributes in terms of movesets and what they can provide separates them? Or more or less is it being looked at the same?
Alright, so narratively speaking, I mean, what this does is it teaches Goku and Vegeta to rely on each other and not rely on anybody else for help. I mean, think about it. I mean, what are the odds of Shin always going to be there? What are the odds of you always going to have a pair of Potara in your pocket? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, when you look at it narratively speaking, if we're going to expect for Goku and Vegeta to explore other universes and face other enemies and build and stuff like that, I'm not going to expect for Goku to have Potara earrings in his pocket all the time. The same goes for Vegeta. So narratively speaking, you kind of got, you have to give them different, you have to pave different roads for them to walk through in order for them to, you know, get through whatever challenges in front of them. And Meta Marie's fusion is one of the best ways to do that. I mean, they could just do it on site. Yeah, they have to buy time, and yeah, there's certain things that have to go a certain way for them to, you know, be able to do it, but that's what makes the story interesting from a narrative standpoint. Now, as far as like the whole A times B, A plus B, well, yeah, if you believe that it's still A plus B, then Vegito from the Black Hawk definitively slaps easily. Legitimately, Goku Black slaps Gogeta if that's the case, if it's A plus B. And it just doesn't make sense. And the idea of this whole A plus B garbage or whatever, it's kind of debunked by the simple notion that the fact that, for example, Goten and Trunks, they trained in the Hyperbolic and the Rosat for not even the full allotted amount of time that they were supposed to be in there, and yet them fusing, they were able to fight Super Buu as Super Saiyan 3. And I mean, Super Saiyan 3 is 400 times, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you have Super Saiyans 50 times, then 2 times that, then you have 4 times after that for Super Saiyan 3, but you get the point. So it's like Gotenks was, arguably enough to fight Super, but then Super was holding back. But the main point is that they went from Goten and Trunks to doing finger fusion, and then that was not A plus B. It was substantially multiplicative by some way, shape, or form. And Goku, if anything, was pretty confident in Metamarise fusion being the way to defeat Buu. And there's many other instances. You go back to the Black Arc, for example. The whole, Vegito's stronger because he's still so strong, Potara can't contain him. Well, then you're implying that Vegito is stronger than Kefla. That's not true at all. You're implying Vegito Blue is stronger than New Ioman Phase 2, and that's just not true at all. And there's just, the minute you try to like power skill too much. Now here's the thing: if you want to power skill it, fine. I respect that, right? The minute Akira came in, or whoever came in, right? I'm pretty sure it was Akira that stated this, right? That the weekly match.
Yes, it was by Toriyama.
Okay, so that's it. So that's it. It doesn't matter what the guide said 100 years ago. None of that stuff is relevant anymore. He's looking at it from a narrative perspective.
Right,
he's trying
but
to make
I do want to bring
easier.
up one thing. In the first English dub, it was stated that the earrings are more effective. In the second dub, it was implied by the Elder Kai that it was stronger or something along those lines of the fusion having to be superior than the Metamarise. In the original Japanese dub, they never stated it being any stronger, and the manga also didn't say anything about it being stronger either. But also remember, this is the same old Kai that was wrong about the fusion for everyone being permanent to begin with, because he assumed that the Potara fusions would be permanent even for mortals. But again, there are 2 different dubs, and even including the Japanese sub and the manga, which imply different factors. But overall, it was looked at objectively that the earrings were simply more effective at the time because of their usage for the Kais and what it offered for them, than having to have that be passed down to the mortals. Now, when looking at this Broly movie, Gogeta remains the way he does until the very end, so his fusion time does not burn out because he's a Super Saiyan Blue or because he's exerting too much power. And again, I do feel as if retcons are coming, and more retcons are bound to happen in the future, but until that given time, if both characters were to exist in the same plane at the same time, when it comes to power, they would be equal. When it comes to speed, all that kind of stuff, they're equal. The only deciding factor I would have to give them both is how they conduct themselves in that moment, and how they approach the fight, with how they, the methods in which they use to combat each other. For example, using the Spirit Sword, the Big Bang Kamehameha, Final Kamehameha, so on and so forth. So that's where the implication is there. But again, people are still going to imply that one is definitely stronger than the other, and I wanted to get your thoughts on how you feel about that.
That's fine. I mean, listen, we need things to discuss, right? As a fandom, you need things to discuss, and if the fandom wants to kill each other, fine, right? That's totally fine. If the fandom wants to kill each other, that's totally fine. I say let them, but the main point here is that, if you want to go with original guides and feats and statements and stuff like that throughout the history of Dragon Ball Z going forward, then yeah, Vegito, based on consistent logic, would still win despite what Akira Toriyama says. Akira's word can be disproven. It's been disproven a few times before. He's contradicted himself a few times before. But the main point is that if he's saying, hey, they're equal now, that's it. It's as simple as that. And the whole Elder Kai thing, well, yeah, the Elder Kai stated that someone evil locked him away in the sword. Then we find out that was Beerus in Super. So it's like, come on. That ultimately what it comes down to is that they need a narrative in order for Goku and Vegeta to not always rely on someone else. They need to rely on each other sometimes. And I would argue that it kind of ties into the idea of Whis' training, where, if they were to work together, this is one of the ways that they would have to work together, instead of relying on the gods, instead of relying on someone else to give them some plot wank accessory that they would wear, and then all this other stuff. So the whole, going back to a point I was trying to make before, is that, Kefla, for example, this is where, and I've said this before, so for those guys who think I'm just wanking Gogeta so far, I got you, Vegeta boys, all right? So here's the thing. I said this before when the Vegito episode came out, and then when I saw Kefla. Kefla was completely broken, and she lasted about like a minute and a half or a minute in terms of tournament to power time. And the thing that I think a lot of people forget when they try to scale how much time like the Fusees got in the tournament, and then as well as the Goku Black or the MZ fight, is that these actual battles, even though they're being animated so we can see them, but they're actually happening in super fast high speeds. Like it's completely retarded how fast these fighters are fighting at. So I kind of get the whole notion of them exerting power, and the Potara couldn't sustain the fusion. Perhaps if they want to retcon that, they can talk about, well, the Potara was from universe, wasn't from their original universe, and maybe there was like a hole in it. Maybe the Potaras are you know, the effectiveness of the Potaras are dependent on the Kaioshin that's wearing them, or I don't know, they could do anything in the future, but for now, what matters is that they're trying to build this narrative to where Goku and Vegeta can rely on each other and work together to get things done. So if you ask me, I don't care. I personally don't care what if they're equal. I don't care if one is stronger than the other. Ultimately, I'm still going to like Gogeta regardless. And who's stronger than the other doesn't really apply to me. And generally, the fandom tends to favor characters that they feel are stronger than the other. And I say, if they want to argue Vegito is still stronger based on feats or based on statements and completely ignore what Akira himself is saying going forward into the future of Dragon Ball and the franchise and everything that we have to offer, everything that we can look forward to,
right.
I don't like the idea of fusion as a whole anyway. I think it's a cheapskate. It's a cheat code out of a situation that they should be able to get themselves out of. Saiyans have no limits, so if they have no limitations, well, we need to live by that. But the thing is that Gogeta was simply brought back for fan service, for marketing, and because we've been, you know, having Vegito shoved down our throats for X amount of time. So I get it. Vegito, he didn't last as long as he did in the MZ fight. They stripped Vegito and they gave it to Trunks for whatever stupid reason. I 100% agree with that. And then we see Kefla, who's broken, and she becomes UI level just by being excited to do it, and her fusion doesn't defuse at all. But then you have to ask yourself, well, yeah, that's true, but she was only on screen for the Tournament of Power for a minute of the actual fight. Yeah, she got a whole episode. So if that's what you're arguing, that doesn't really apply because that episode was only a minute long after the Kefla finished fighting Goku. So when you look at it, it's pretty much equal in terms of like Potara sustainment. But like I said, it comes down to the narrative, and if people want to, if you want my answer as far as like, does this kind of devalue fusion? Well, I guess it kind of devalues the difference in character, right? That's
right,
what it
because
does.
Like it doesn't, like there's like this stigma now. It's like, what's the point of either?
It doesn't devalue
if either using either or when they're going to become the same, or at least be the same in terms of power. I think the only deciding factor is the approach. Good examples of this is seeing, you know, Vegito and Gogeta throughout the years and seeing what they were able to do. Yes, I guess you can count GT as well because that's still an incarnation of Gogeta, and even then, he's much different than his, you know, Fusion Reborn counterpart, who is also different than his Dragon Ball Super Broly version counterpart. So I think when looking at this objectively, fans really shouldn't be mad, and please do not compare Black Arc Vegito to Dragon Ball Super Broly Gogeta, because Gogeta right now, yes, Gogeta right now is stronger than Vegito from that arc. That's already indefinite. If they end up somehow, let's throw in a hypothetical out there, if they bring in Vegito in the next arc, then you can rest assured that since Goku and Vegeta have grown from this Broly fight, that fusion of Vegito would be stronger than Gogeta based on their ever so increasing feats, based on their, you know, Zenkais, and that's just the natural order of things. But for me, I always figured, you know, especially looking at this, I always had this notion that one was definitely superior over the other in some kind of concept, and a lot of people like to toss out the timer factor out there and saying, well, if they had the opportunity to both use up their fusion time, 30 minutes versus 1 hour, then you clearly have a winner in that aspect. But things change, retcons happen, and I feel like right now we have to accept that, especially if Toriyama himself, the guy who created this whole universe, is saying and implying that if they existed in the same place right now, that they're equal. So in your final words here, like, what do you have to say to the fandom who keeps reiterating or regurgitating the same factor of the multiplicative, you know, kind of power scaling added on to Vegito versus Gogeta, or the people that have anything to say to imply that one is definitely stronger over the other despite the logic or common sense of the writers having to step in and saying no?
I would say it's equivalent to people thinking Broly defeats Jiren easily. Like, there's just... That's the best way I could summarize it. Well, I mean, that's fine. I mean,
that's going to be for a different video, though, but I see your point.
But I mean, my intention is not to get you guys angry. Like, I'm saying, go ahead, kill each other. Fine, I don't care. Like, you know, you guys are like, fine. I'm not really one to debate, like, the whole, like, fusies and stuff like that. If Akira says, hey, they're equal, I'll take it. It is what it is. I don't care. Just give me a good movie, give me another series, and I'll be happy. Maybe we can discuss certain arcs of Vegito versus a Gogeta, or vice versa if we see them more in the future. I personally, despite how cool they are, I am kind of like, I'm looking at it from this perspective, okay, just to wrap this conversation up. Dragon Ball Super, Goku and Vegeta, despite attaining god levels of powers, are still losing characters who don't have any god level powers. Like, there's no god training to them, and they're just simply being plot wank just for the sake of them having someone to face against, and that's just, to me, it has to stop. The only character who had something like that was Goku Black and Jiren. That's it. Jiren was trained by a god, and Goku Black was a god possessing Goku's body. I mean, Zamasu was a god possessing Goku's body. That's it. Like, that's the only narrative thing that made sense to me. Everybody else, Kefla, Aniraza, all these other people that Gohan fighting Goku on top of, like, all this other stuff, 17, like, this stuff has to stop. Like, you know, so it's not that. I think that we just need a little more consistency. I think if the scaling was a little more consistent, I think if Vegito were the one to defeat MZ in that arc, and then they didn't just stroke Trunks off for the sake of like plot convenience, then I think people would have been a little more content with Vegito. Because then we got Kefla after that, and then based on visual screen time, it looked like she got more time because she had a whole episode dedicated to her. As to her, Vegito had a couple minutes of one episode, and then they gave the rest to Trunks. So, but if you break it down, like I said, like I mentioned before, Kefla technically was fused for like a minute, and Vegito arguably the same thing. So it's like there's really no debate there in my opinion. But as far as like, it's just a fandom thing. It's just, you know, Gogeta fans versus Vegito fans, and people really just not wanting to be not really getting used to change. And I would say that, man, just take the L. Like, it doesn't really matter, but that's just how I feel.
No matter how you look at it now, I think that it's safe to say that Vegito and Gogeta right now, currently, if they were to exist in the same place at the same time, really don't have that much of a difference in terms of power anymore. But I still do feel as if the fandom is going to choose on whether or not they want to side with Vegito on this one or go with Gogeta, and this is where you guys come in. Let us know in the comment section below. Are you guys leaning more towards Vegito? Are you guys leaning more towards Gogeta in this case? What are your thoughts on having them both be equal in power? And what do you think the future holds for fusions in the future of Dragon Ball Super? Thank you all so much for watching, guys. Once more, if of course you guys are new to this channel, consider punching that subscribe button and turning on all notifications to always stay in the loop whenever a brand new video is posted. Post your comments and your theories in the comment section below. Thank you all once more for watching, and I'll be seeing you all down in the comment section below. Have a great day, everybody. Peace.
This is the Galactic Emperor of the Universe, and of course I'm here to tell you to subscribe to UnrealEntGaming and all his social media platforms. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you can be the first to know every time that he uploads a new video.
Oh, did someone say UnrealEntGaming? Oh my god.
The fuck, Zarbon? Put on some clothes!
Well, why don't you put on any clothes?
What? I don't need clothes. Jesus Christ, that's huge!